The ballroom was filled with a brightness that felt almost artificial. It wasn't the warm glow of a cozy home, but the sharp, reflective shine of polished glass and expensive crystal. Sunlight poured in through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that lined the east wall, illuminating every speck of dust on the pristine white tablecloths. For Amanda, the light wasn't cheerful. It was an interrogation lamp. It exposed the bags under her eyes and the slight tremor in her hands as she adjusted the placement of a name card for the 10th time. This was the biggest day of the year for the charity, the Sunrise Gala. Amanda had been working for the organization for 3 years. And she loved the cause, building shelters for families in crisis. But days like this tested her soul. She was the senior coordinator, which meant she was the person everyone looked at when something went wrong, and the person no one noticed when things went right. The air in the room smelled of lilies and expensive perfume, a cloying scent that made her headache throb a little harder behind her temples. She stood near the entrance to the main hall, clutching a clipboard like it was a shield. Her heels were pinching her toes, a sharp reminder that she had been on her feet since 5 in the morning. Around her, the staff was scrambling. Waiters in crisp black vests were arranging silverware with surgical precision, while the sound crew checked the microphones, causing screeches of feedback that made everyone wince. Amanda took a deep breath, trying to find her center. They had 3 hours until the doors opened. 3 hours until the city's wealthiest residents arrived in their designer clothes to drink champagne and write checks that would change lives. It was a high-pressure environment, and Amanda felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She had dealt with difficult donors all week. One woman had called her 4 times to demand a specific brand of sparkling water that wasn't even available in the state. Another had threatened to pull his funding if his table wasn't closest to the stage. It was hard to remember the kindness of strangers when you were constantly navigating the egos of the rich. Amanda felt her cynicism growing like a weed in her mind. She was tired of the fake smiles, the tired small talk, and the feeling that she was just a servant to people who viewed the world as their own personal playground. She checked her watch. Time was slipping away too fast. She needed to verify the final list of VIPs who would be greeted personally by the director, Mr. Sterling. She began walking along the row of tables, her eyes scanning the seating chart. As she walked, she watched the hotel staff setting up the floral arrangements. They were towering displays of white roses and hydrangeas, beautiful but utterly impractical. They blocked the view of anyone sitting on the opposite side of the table. Amanda made a note to have them lowered slightly, adding another task to her already impossible list. The stress was making her sharp-edged. When a young waiter accidentally bumped into her arm, nearly knocking the clipboard from her hand, she snapped. "Watch where you're going," she barked, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. The waiter froze, his eyes wide with fear, and stammered an apology. Amanda immediately felt a pang of guilt. She rubbed her forehead. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her shoulders slumping. It's been a long day, please be careful." The waiter nodded quickly and hurried away. Amanda sighed. She hated who she became during these events. She used to be patient, the kind of person who laughed easily. But the relentless demands of this job were turning her into someone she didn't recognize. She felt like a tightly wound coil, ready to snap at the slightest provocation. She needed a break, a moment of quiet, but there was no time. The glass doors at the far end of the room slid open, and a small group of early arrivals walked in. Amanda straightened her back, pasting on her professional event smile. It wasn't a guest, though. It was a man who looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a coffee shop. Amanda paused, watching him with a critical eye. He was wearing a dark blazer that looked like it had seen better days, paired with a simple t-shirt and jeans. He didn't have the polished look of the benefactors who usually flooded this hall. His hair was messy, and he looked a little tired around the eyes. He stood just inside the entrance, looking around the room with a sense of awe, as if he had never seen a chandelier before. Amanda's internal alarm bells started ringing. Security was tight, but sometimes people slipped through. She figured he was a tourist who had wandered off the street, or perhaps an autograph seeker, hoping to catch a glimpse of a celebrity before the event started. The last thing she needed was a disruption. She started walking towards him, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Her mind was already racing with the script she would use to remove him. "I'm sorry, sir, this is a private event." Simple, direct, effective. She didn't have the energy for pleasantries. As she got closer, the man noticed her approaching. He didn't look guilty or nervous like most gatecrashers did. Instead, he gave her a small, shy smile. He looked strangely familiar in a way Amanda couldn't quite place, but her brain was too tired to play the guessing game. He stepped towards her, raising a hand slightly to get her attention. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was quiet, raspy, but polite. He had a gentle demeanor that seemed out of place in the aggressive, high-stakes atmosphere of the gala. "I'm looking for the person in charge. I was told I could find them here." Amanda stopped in front of him, crossing her arms. She looked him up and down, taking in the worn boots and the casual clothes. In a room full of tuxedos and evening gowns, he stuck out like a sore thumb. She felt a flash of irritation. Why did people think they could just walk into a venue like this without an invitation? Did they think the rules didn't apply to them? "This is a private fundraising event," Amanda said, her voice cold and clipped. She didn't bother with the smile this time. "The registration desk is outside. If you don't have a ticket, I'm afraid you can't be in here." The man blinked, looking a bit taken aback by her hostility. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "Oh, I see. No, I don't have a ticket. I actually spoke to someone on the phone earlier this week. Mr. Henderson, I told him I'd be stopping by to drop something off." Amanda let out a short, cynical laugh. She heard this excuse at least once a month. People thought they could drop a name to get access to the open bar or the free food. "Mr. Henderson is very busy preparing for our donors," she said, turning her body slightly to guide him back toward the exit. "I'm sure whatever you have can be mailed to the office. Or you can leave it at the front desk with security." The man didn't move. He stood his ground, looking at her with earnest eyes. "It's really important that I give this to him personally. It's a contribution for the new wing." He reached into the inside pocket of his worn blazer. Amanda watched his hand, expecting him to pull out a crumpled $20 bill or a flyer for his own cause. She just wanted him gone. She had 100 tables to check, a speech to review, and a million other problems to solve. She didn't have time to humor a well-meaning but misguided stranger. "Look," Amanda said, stepping closer to him, invading his personal space slightly to intimidate him. "I don't know who you are, and I don't know what kind of game you're playing. But you are interrupting a very serious event. People here donate millions of dollars. They don't need people like you wandering around bothering them." The man paused, his hand halfway into his jacket. He looked at her, and for a second his eyes held a deep sadness that gave Amanda pause. But she pushed the feeling away. She was stressed, she was tired, and she was done being nice. "Please," he said softly, pulling out a simple white envelope. It was plain, no logo, no letterhead. "Just take a look, it's not a game." He held the envelope out to her. Amanda looked at it, then back at his face. She felt a surge of anger. She felt like he was mocking her, mocking the hard work everyone had put into this day. Here she was, killing herself for a cause, and this guy walks in off the street acting like he was a savior. She didn't take the envelope. Instead, she stared him down, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You need to leave," she said, pointing a manicured finger toward the glass doors. "Now. Before I call security and have you dragged out of here, I've had enough of these pranks." The man didn't back down. He stood there holding the envelope, looking at her with a patience that infuriated her. He was quiet, calm, and completely out of place. Amanda's temper, held back by hours of stress, finally snapped. She wasn't just mad at him. She was mad at the job, the guests, the pressure, and the world. He was just the one standing in front of her. "Give me that," she snapped, snatching the white envelope from his hand before he could react. She held it between her fingers like it was dirty. "If this is what I think it is, you're going to regret walking in here." The man watched her, his expression unreadable. He didn't fight back, he didn't yell. He just watched as she turned the envelope over in her hands, ready to tear it apart and throw him out. But as her fingers grazed the edge of the paper, she hesitated for just a fraction of a second. The room around them was buzzing with final preparations, but in this small circle of tension, everything had gone silent. She looked at the envelope, then up at the man's face, waiting for the moment he would break, but he didn't. He just stood there, waiting. Amanda's fingers were trembling, but not from fear. It was pure, unfiltered adrenaline. She flipped the plain white envelope over and slid her finger under the seal, ripping it open with a violent jerk. She was fully prepared to pull out a crudely drawn picture, a flyer for a local band, or maybe a handwritten note demanding money. She wanted to be right. She wanted to have a reason to call security and have this man, who looked so out of place, escorted out of the building. She wanted to protect the event she had poured her soul into. She pulled the single piece of paper out and unfolded it. The sun hitting the glass wall behind her reflected onto the document, making it gleam. Amanda squinted, her eyes scanning the paper. It was a check, a bank check from a major financial institution. She looked at the numbers, her brain struggling to process the sequence of zeros. There were too many of them. She looked at the pay to the order of line. It was made out to the charity. Then her eyes drifted to the signature line at the bottom right. The handwriting was messy, hurried, but the name was legible. Keanu Reeves *. Amanda let out a sharp, barking laugh. It was a loud, harsh sound that cut through the ambient noise of the room. A few waiters setting up a bar nearby stopped to look at her, but she didn't care. She looked from the check to the man standing in front of her, wearing his worn-out blazer and jeans. "You have got to be kidding me," she said, shaking her head. "This is your angle. You really thought this would work?" The man shifted his weight again, looking slightly confused by her reaction. "It's not an angle," he said, his voice steady. "I told you I want to help. The money is for the new building, the one for the families." Amanda felt a hot flush rise up her neck. She felt insulted. She felt like he was making a mockery of the entire charity, of the children who needed help, and of her intelligence. To her, this wasn't a generous offer. It was a cruel prank. A guy dressing down, playing the humble hero, and flashing a fake check with a celebrity's name on it. It was the kind of thing that happened on internet shows, people pranking hardworking individuals just to get a laugh. "Do you think I'm stupid?" Amanda asked, her voice rising. She waved the check in the air, the paper flapping wildly. "You think because I work here, I'm going to see a famous name and just faint with gratitude? You walk in here looking like a slob, hand me a piece of paper with $10 million on it, $10 million, and sign it with a movie star's name. What is this? Is there a hidden camera? Are your friends hiding in the plants waiting to laugh at me?" The man reached out a hand, palm open, trying to calm her down. "Please, it's real. You can call the bank. The funds are verified. I just wanted to do something good without a press release. That's why I came alone." "Without a press release?" Amanda sneered. She took a step closer, invading his space again. "That's the biggest lie I've ever heard. People like you don't do anything without a press release. You want the attention. You want everyone to know how wonderful you are. But you picked the wrong person to scam, buddy." Her stress, the lack of sleep, and the pressure of the last few weeks all coalesced into a singular moment of rage. She didn't want to hear his explanations. She didn't want to check the bank. She just wanted the problem to disappear. She looked at the check, the paper that represented a lie in her eyes. "You know what?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I don't need this garbage in my event." Before the man could say another word, Amanda gripped the edges of the check with both hands. The paper felt crisp and substantial between her fingers, but that only made her angrier. It felt like a weapon. "No, wait," the man started, his eyes widening. With a savage tear, Amanda ripped the check down the center. The sound was distinct, a crisp asterisk snap asterisk that echoed in the quiet space between them. But she wasn't done. The rage was a fire that needed to burn itself out. She ripped it again, crosswise, then again. She shredded the paper into pieces, her breathing heavy and ragged. "You want to play games?" she yelled, throwing the confetti of shredded paper into the air. The white scraps fluttered down like snow, landing on the pristine marble floor and the man's worn boots. Get out of here and take your little joke with you." The man stood frozen. He didn't look at Amanda. He looked down at the floor, at the remnants of the check scattered around his feet. His face didn't twist in anger. He didn't shout back. He just looked incredibly sad. It was a look of profound disappointment, as if he had lost faith in humanity in that single moment. He bent down slowly and picked up one of the larger pieces, turning it over in his fingers as if trying to find a way to fix it. Amanda stood there, her chest heaving, her hands still clenched into fists. She felt a rush of satisfaction, followed immediately by a wave of exhaustion. She had protected the event. She had stopped the disruption. She looked at him with disgust. "I said leave before I have you arrested for trespassing and fraud." The man straightened up. He looked at the torn piece of paper in his hand, then at Amanda. For a second, the room felt incredibly still. The sunlight seemed to focus on him, highlighting the lines of worry on his face and the genuine kindness in his eyes that Amanda was too blind to see. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said quietly. "I really just wanted to help." Amanda rolled her eyes so hard it hurt. "Save the act for the paparazzi." She turned her back on him, dismissing him completely. She expected to hear the sound of the glass doors sliding open as he left. She expected to feel the rush of cool air from the lobby. She was already mentally moving on to the next crisis, checking her clipboard, ready to yell at a waiter for a misplaced fork. But the doors didn't open. The air didn't move. Instead, a heavy silence fell over the entire ballroom. It wasn't just the silence of the man standing behind her. It was a hush that rippled outward from the entrance. The clinking of silverware stopped. The murmur of the staff died away. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from busy chaos to paralyzed stillness. Amanda frowned. She felt a prickle on the back of her neck. It was that primal instinct that tells you when you are being watched, and not just by one person, but by everyone. She turned around, ready to scold the man for not leaving, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking past her toward the main entrance of the hall. Amanda followed his gaze. Standing at the top of the wide staircase that led down into the ballroom was Mr. Sterling, the director of the charity. He was a man who usually commanded the room with his loud voice and booming laugh. He was a man who was never speechless. But right now, Mr. Sterling was frozen. He was halfway down the steps, one hand gripping the brass railing so tightly his knuckles were white. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide and locked on the man in the worn blazer. Mr. Sterling looked like he had seen a ghost. His face, usually flushed with color, had drained to a pale, ashen gray. Behind Mr. Sterling, the chairman of the board, and several high-profile donors had just arrived. They were standing in a cluster, dressed in their expensive suits, staring into the room. They weren't looking at the decorations. They weren't looking at the view. Every single one of them was staring at the man Amanda had just yelled at, the man whose check she had torn into confetti. Amanda's heart skipped a beat. The satisfaction evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. She looked back at the man in the blazer. He was still standing there, holding the torn piece of paper. He looked small standing there alone, but the way the heavy hitters of the city were looking at him made him seem like the most important person in the world. "Mr. Sterling," one of the board members whispered from the top of the stairs, her voice trembling with excitement. Is that who I think it is?" Mr. Sterling didn't answer. He couldn't answer. He just stared at the man. Then his eyes dropped to the floor, to the pile of shredded white paper littering the marble. He looked back at Amanda, and the expression on his face was one of absolute horror. Amanda's grip on her clipboard loosened. Her hands began to sweat. The anger that had felt so righteous 10 seconds ago now felt like a lead weight in her stomach. She looked at the man again, really looked at him, away from the clothes and the hair. She saw the sadness in his eyes, the gentle way he held himself. She looked at the torn piece of paper in his hand. She saw the signature again, Keanu Reeves asterisk. The realization hit her like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a prank. The man standing in front of her, the man she had just screamed at and humiliated, was actually Keanu Reeves. And she had just torn up a $10 million donation in his face. The silence that filled the sunlit ballroom was heavy, pressing against Amanda's ears like a deep underwater pressure. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the terrified stillness of a room where a catastrophe has just occurred. The air seemed to stop circulating. The distant hum of the city outside the glass walls felt miles away. Amanda stood rooted to the spot, her clipboard feeling like a lead weight in her hands. She watched Mr. Sterling, a man who usually dominated every room he entered, gripping the brass banister so hard she thought he might bend the metal. His face was a mask of shock. His eyes darted from the man in the worn blazer to the scraps of white paper littering the pristine floor, and then back to the man. "Mr. Reeves," Mr. Sterling whispered the name. It wasn't a question, it was a breathless realization. The sound of that name spoken by her boss acted like a gunshot in a library. The man standing by the torn check, Keanu Reeves, gave a small, uncomfortable nod. He didn't look like a movie star in that moment. He looked like a guest who had just spilled wine on the host's carpet. He looked down at the pieces of paper at his feet, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. Amanda's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, irregular rhythm. She felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her feeling cold and lightheaded. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with terrifying force. The check hadn't been a fake. The signature hadn't been a forgery. The humble attitude wasn't an act. She had just berated, mocked, and destroyed a $10 million donation from one of the most famous actors in the world, right in front of the director of the charity. Mr. Sterling finally found his legs. He stumbled down the remaining stairs, nearly tripping over his own expensive shoes in his haste. He rushed past Amanda without even glancing at her. It was as if she had become invisible, a piece of furniture obstructing the path to someone who actually mattered. The total dismissal stung more than any shout could have. "Mr. Reeves, Mr." Sterling said again, his voice cracking as he reached the bottom step. He reached out and took Keanu's hand, shaking it vigorously with both of his own hands. I cannot apologize enough. I had no idea you were arriving today. We would have rolled out the red carpet, literally." Keanu smiled weakly, pulling his hand gently away after a polite moment. "It's okay, really. I didn't want a red carpet. That's why I came early. I just wanted to give this personally and get out of here before the crowd arrived." He gestured vaguely toward the floor, toward the snowdrift of shredded paper. "Mr." Sterling followed his gaze and froze again. He stared at the check fragments as if they were broken shards of ancient pottery. "What?" Mr. Sterling's voice trailed off. He looked at Amanda for the first time, but his gaze was filled with a confusion that quickly turned into a sharp, piercing anger. "Amanda, what is this? What happened here?" Amanda opened her mouth, but her throat felt like it was closing up. No words came out. She tried to formulate a sentence, an explanation, anything that would make this nightmare go away. "I thought it was a prank." He looked like a stranger. "I was protecting the event." The excuses sounded pathetic even in her own head. She, Amanda stammered, her voice barely a squeak. "She thought it was a fake," Keanu interjected quietly. He spoke up, stepping slightly in front of Amanda, almost shielding her from Mr. Sterling's fury. "It was an honest mistake. She was just doing her job. She thought I was some guy trying to crash the party." Mr. Sterling's face turned a deep shade of red. He looked at Keanu, then back at Amanda, his chest heaving. "An honest mistake. Amanda, that was a certified check for $10 million. $10 million. Do you have any idea what that money could do? Do you have any idea how long we have been trying to secure funding for the new hospice wing?" The words hit Amanda like physical blows. Hospice wing. She felt her knees weaken. She remembered the man, Keanu, mentioning something about a new building, but in her arrogance and stress, she hadn't listened. She had tuned him out. Now, the reality of what she had done crashed down on her. This wasn't just about money. It was about the children and families that money was going to help. Families who needed a place to say goodbye in peace. She had ripped that hope to shreds because she was having a bad day. Amanda took a shaky breath. "I am so sorry, I didn't know." The check looked, "I thought." "You didn't think," Mr. Sterling snapped. He turned away from her, unable to look at her face. He looked back at Keanu, his expression desperate. "Mr. Reeves, please, I assure you this is not how we treat our donors. We can fix this. We can contact the bank, stop payment on that check, and issue a new one immediately. I will write it myself if I have to. Just, please, forgive this incompetence." Amanda watched Keanu closely. She expected him to be angry. She expected him to yell at her, or demand to speak to the board, or simply walk out in disgust. That's what anyone else would have done. But he didn't. Keanu looked at the shredded paper on the floor. He crouched down, his knees popping slightly, and began to pick up the pieces. He handled them gently, collecting the torn scraps in his large hands. "It's okay," Keanu said softly, standing back up. He looked at Mr. Sterling, his eyes calm and serious. "We don't need to call the bank yet." Mr. Sterling looked confused. "But it's torn. It's destroyed. It's paper," Keanu said simply. He looked over at Amanda. His gaze wasn't hateful. It wasn't even judgmental. It was just sad. It was the look someone gives a hurt animal that doesn't know why it lashed out. "I can write another one. That's not the problem." Then what is the problem, Mr. Sterling asked, his voice trembling. Keanu sighed, a heavy, weary sound. He looked around the beautiful room at the expensive floral arrangements and the crystal glasses. The problem is that I wanted this to be simple. I didn't want a press release. I didn't want a plaque with my name on it. I didn't want a dinner in my honor. I just wanted to help the kids. I wanted to walk in, give the money, and walk out, anonymously. He paused, looking directly at Amanda. But now there's a scene. Now people are staring. He gestured toward the top of the stairs where the board members and a few early guests were openly gawking, their phones out, recording the interaction. Now it's about the drama, and that's the last thing those kids need. Amanda felt tears pricking the corners of her eyes. She tried to blink them back, but one escaped and rolled down her cheek. She felt exposed. The sunlight that had previously felt like an interrogation lamp now felt like a spotlight exposing her shame. She realized that in her attempt to protect the charity from a fake, she had ruined the very thing the donor valued most, his humility and his desire for privacy. Mr. Sterling wiped sweat from his forehead. We can keep it quiet. I can swear the staff to secrecy. We can. Keanu held up a hand to stop him. It's too late for that. He looked at the pieces of the check in his hand. I think I'm going to go for a walk. I need some air. No, please, Mr. Sterling begged, sounding desperate. Don't go. Let us fix this. I'll have Amanda fetch you anything you need. Coffee, water, a private room. Amanda flinched at the use of her name, knowing it was associated with failure now. Keanu looked at Amanda again. He saw the tears on her face. He saw the way her hands were shaking. He took a step toward her. Mr. Sterling flinched, worried the actor might strike her or scream, but Keanu just stopped a few feet away. Are you okay? He asked her. The question was so unexpected, so gentle, that it broke Amanda completely. She wasn't okay. She was the worst person in the room. She had humiliated a good man and destroyed a massive donation. She shook her head, unable to speak. I'm sorry I scared you, Keanu said quietly. I know I look a mess. I've been working all night. I probably shouldn't have come like this. It was my fault, too. He was taking the blame. He was comforting her, even though she was the one who had torn up his money. The kindness in his voice was infinitely worse than any anger. It made her feel small, not because he was powerful, but because he was good, and in that moment, she knew she was not. Keanu turned back to Mr. Sterling. I'm going to step outside for a moment. Not to leave, just to breathe. I'll come back. We can figure out the check then. Mr. Sterling nodded vigorously, relieved that the disaster wasn't total. Yes, of course. Take your time. The VIP lounge is right there. Just the pavement is fine, Keanu said with a faint smile. He turned and walked toward the glass wall, his hands still full of the torn paper. As he pushed the button to open the sliding glass door, the room seemed to exhale. But the relief was short-lived for Amanda. As soon as the door slid shut behind Keanu, Mr. Sterling turned on her. The look of panic was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fury. You, he hissed, stepping close so the staff wouldn't hear. You have just put this entire organization in jeopardy. Do you know that? If he walks out that door and doesn't come back, I will personally make sure you never work in this city again. Do you hear me? Amanda nodded, tears streaming freely now. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't build hospitals, Amanda, he spat. He looked toward the glass wall where Keanu was standing outside, looking out at the city. Fix this. I don't know how, but fix it. Go out there, don't come back until he agrees to write that check again. With that, Mr. Sterling turned on his heel and marched up the stairs to smooth things over with the board members, leaving Amanda standing alone in the middle of the beautiful, ruined room. Amanda stood by the glass partition for a long moment, watching the man outside. The ballroom behind her felt like a different planet, a place of crystal, stress, and fake smiles. Outside, on the concrete pavement, the world looked rougher but real. Cars drove by, people hurried past with coffees and shopping bags, completely unaware that the movie star standing by the wall had just been verbally attacked by a charity coordinator. She took a deep breath, wiping her damp palms on her skirt. She had to go out there. Mr. Sterling's voice still rang in her ears, threatening her career, but that wasn't why she was stepping forward now. She had to go out there because she felt terrible. She had to look him in the eye and apologize like a human being, not like an employee covering her tracks. She pressed the button on the wall, and the glass door slid open with a soft hiss. The noise of the city immediately washed over her, horns honking, sirens wailing, the low rumble of conversation. It was loud, but it felt more honest than the silence inside. Keanu was standing a few feet away, leaning against the stone facade of the building. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking down at his hands. He was holding the torn scraps of the check, trying to line them up on the flat surface of a small stone planter box filled with decorative shrubs. He looked like a child trying to fix a broken toy. Amanda walked over slowly, her heels clicking on the pavement. She stopped a few feet away, not wanting to crowd him. I brought some tape," she said quietly. She held up a small roll she had grabbed from a supply table on her way out. It felt like a ridiculous offering, like putting a Band-Aid on a deep wound. Keanu looked up. The sunlight caught the lines around his eyes, making him look older and more tired than he did in movies. He looked at the tape, then at her. A small, crooked smile touched his lips. "Thanks," he said, "but I think $10 million is a bit much for Scotch tape." Amanda felt a fresh wave of guilt crash over her. "Mr. Reeves, She stopped, took a shaky breath, and started again. "I am so sorry, I don't even know where to start. I was stressed, I was overwhelmed, and I let my imagination run wild. I thought you were someone trying to make a fool of us. I never dreamed." "It's okay," he said, cutting her off gently. He turned back to the pieces of paper. "Honestly, I get it. You see a guy in jeans and a dirty jacket wandering around a place like this, alarms go off. You were doing your job, Amanda. You were protecting the place." "I wasn't protecting it," she said, her voice trembling. "I was protecting my ego, I was rude, I was cruel, and the worst part is I didn't even listen. You said you wanted to help and I just screamed at you." Keanu sighed and leaned back against the wall. He crossed his arms, the torn check still in one hand. "We all have bad days. Days where we feel like the whole world is against us. I've been there. It's easy to lash out when you're under pressure." Amanda looked at him, really looked at him. He wasn't acting. He wasn't giving a speech. He meant it. He was forgiving her, not because he had to, but because he seemed to genuinely understand what it felt like to be stressed and pushed to the breaking point. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why come here yourself? Why not just have your lawyer call or send a wire transfer? You're you. You don't have to walk into a hotel and hand over a check." Keanu looked down at his boots. He kicked a small pebble on the ground. "Because money is easy, you know. Writing a number on a piece of paper is easy. It doesn't mean anything if you don't connect with the people it's supposed to help." He paused, looking out at the traffic. "My sister. She fought leukemia for years, a long time ago. We spent a lot of time in hospitals, a lot of time waiting in rooms that smelled like antiseptic and fear. I saw how hard it was on families. Not just the patients, but the parents, the siblings, the ones who have to sit there and watch." Amanda stayed silent, listening. "When she passed," he continued, his voice getting quieter, "I realized that I could do something to make that time a little easier for other people. Not to cure cancer, I wish I could do that, but to make the waiting room softer, to get better coffee, to make the chairs more comfortable, to give families a place to sleep that isn't a cold hallway." He looked back at Amanda, his eyes intense. "That's what this donation is for, the new wing, the hospice. I saw the blueprints online. It's going to be a place where people can say goodbye with dignity. I wanted to see the place, or at least meet the people running it, before I gave the money. I wanted to know it was real." Amanda felt tears stinging her eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of empathy. She had worked for this charity for 3 years, processing files and arranging parties, but she had forgotten the human element. She had forgotten the kids and the families. This man who had everything remembered. He cared about the chairs and the coffee and the dignity of strangers. "We are real," Amanda whispered. "The people running it. We care, I care. I just lost sight of it today." "I know you do," Keanu said. "I could see it in your eyes when you were organizing the tables. You looked exhausted, but you looked like you were trying to make everything perfect. That's why I didn't fight back when you yelled. I could see you were carrying a heavy load." Amanda let out a long breath. It felt like she had been holding it in for hours. The tension in her shoulders finally began to loosen. "So," she said, wiping her eyes, "what do we do now? My boss is having a panic attack inside. He thinks you're going to leave and tell the world we're incompetent." Keanu chuckled. It was a dry, raspy sound. "I'm not going to do that. I know how hard nonprofit work is. I don't want to make it harder. He looked at the scraps of paper in his hand one last time, then let them fall into the trash can nearby. I'll write another check, he said simply. Amanda let out a gasp of relief. Oh, thank you, thank you. I can go get a fresh checkbook from the office, or we can call the bank. No need for the bank, Keanu said, patting his chest pocket. I brought a backup, just in case something happened to the first one. I guess my instincts were right. He pulled out a second envelope, identical to the first one. He held it out to Amanda. This time, Amanda didn't snatch it. She reached out with both hands, slowly and respectfully. She took the envelope as if it were made of gold. She looked at it, then up at him. Thank you, she said, and this time the words carried the weight of her true gratitude. Not just for the money, for forgiving me, for reminding me why I do this job. Keanu smiled. It was a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Just make sure those families get that wing, okay? Make sure the chairs are comfortable. I promise, Amanda said. I will oversee it personally. Every single chair. Good, Keanu said. He pushed himself off the wall and stood up straight. He stretched his back, rolling his shoulders. All right. Let's go back inside before your boss passes out. Bea Cyrillic letter 493, Yeru Ndea nodded and turned toward the glass door. As she reached for the button, she paused and looked back at him. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, looking like a regular guy waiting for a bus. But she knew better now. She knew that true strength wasn't about shouting or power suits. It was about grace under pressure. It was about caring more about others than yourself. She held the door open for him. After you, Mr. Reeves, she said softly. He nodded at her and walked through. As they stepped back into the cool, air-conditioned silence of the ballroom, Amanda felt different. The stress was still there, the work was still piled high, but the anger was gone. She walked a little taller, holding the new envelope tight. She was ready to face Mr. Sterling, ready to face the donors, and ready to do the work that mattered. She had been given a second chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. Walking back into the ballroom felt like stepping into a different world. The air inside was cool and still, carrying the scent of lilies and floor wax, a sharp contrast to the gritty smell of exhaust and hot pavement outside. As the glass door slid shut behind them, cutting off the noise of the city, the silence of the room rushed back in. Every eye in the hall was fixed on them. The waiters stood frozen, holding silver trays. The few early arriving board members near the staircase were pretending not to stare, but their phones were lowered and their heads were turned. Mr. Sterling stood at the bottom of the steps, his face a mask of pure anxiety. He looked like a man watching a bomb defusal team. Amanda walked a step behind Keanu, clutching the second envelope in both hands. She felt exposed, but she also felt a strange sense of calm. She had nothing left to hide. Her worst moment had happened, and she was still standing. Keanu didn't look at the crowd. He kept his eyes forward, his posture relaxed. He walked up to Mr. Sterling, who looked as though he might faint. Mr. Reeves, Mr. Sterling breathed out, his eyes darting immediately to the white envelope in Amanda's hands. Is everything? We're good, Keanu said softly. He nodded to Amanda. She has it. Mr. Sterling didn't even look at Amanda. He reached out and gently took the envelope from her hands, treating it like a holy relic. He quickly peeked inside, just to confirm, and let out a long, shuddering breath that seemed to deflate his entire body. He closed his eyes for a second, murmuring a thank you to the ceiling. This is extraordinary, Mr. Sterling said, his voice shaking. We can announce it right now. The press is waiting outside. We can do a photo op by the fountain. This will be the headline of the night. The return of the king. Keanu shook his head immediately. He put a hand on Mr. Sterling's shoulder, stopping him. No press, Keanu said firmly. No photos. No announcements. Mr. Sterling looked confused. But, Mr. Reeves, $10 million. The foundation needs the exposure. People need to know that you support us so others will follow. It's how the game is played. I'm not playing a game, Keanu said. His voice was kind but left no room for argument. I told you I don't want the credit. I don't want my face on a brochure. Use the money for the bricks, for the doctors, for the families. Don't use a dime of it for marketing me. That's the deal. Mr. Sterling hesitated. He looked at the check, then at the reporters waiting outside, clearly torn between his duty to the donor and his instinct as a fundraiser. Finally, he nodded slowly. Okay, as you wish, Anonymous. We will call it an anonymous benefactor. Thank you, Keanu said. He looked around the room one last time. His gaze landed on the floral arrangements, the chandeliers, and the expensive place settings. Then he looked at Amanda. Take care of yourself, Amanda, he said. Don't let the pressure break you. You're better than that. I won't, she promised. Thank you, Keanu. He gave a small two-finger salute, a simple, boyish gesture, and turned toward the exit. He didn't ask for an escort. He didn't wait for applause. He just walked out the same glass doors he had come in, disappearing into the ordinary day, leaving the extraordinary behind. As soon as the doors closed, Mr. Sterling slumped. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright seemed to vanish. He turned to Amanda, his expression complicated. He was still angry, but the overwhelming relief of saving the donation softened his edges. That was the closest I have ever come to a heart attack, Mr. Sterling said, loosening his tie. Amanda, what you did, it was unforgivable professionally, it was reckless. I know, Amanda said quietly, she didn't make excuses. I accept whatever consequences you have, Mr. Sterling looked at her, really looked at her for a long moment. He saw the tear stains on her cheeks, the way her hands were shaking slightly, and the new sense of calm in her eyes. You're not fired, he said finally, but you're on probation, and I'm taking you off the high-profile donor events for a while. You're too tightly wound. Okay, Amanda agreed. However, Mr. Sterling continued, tapping the envelope against his palm. Mr. Reeves specifically requested that this money go to the new hospice wing. He mentioned it outside. That project has been stalled for months because we don't have a site manager who cares enough to handle the details. He said he trusted you to make sure the chairs were comfortable. Amanda looked up, surprised. He said that? He implied it, Mr. Sterling corrected. And frankly, after seeing how you handled yourself out there, apologizing, making it right, I think you might be the right person. You need to remember why we do this, Amanda. You need to remember the people, not the party. I'd like that, Amanda said, feeling a spark of excitement she hadn't felt in years. I'd really like that. 6 months later, the city was gripped by a cold winter, but inside the new hospice wing of the Children's Hospital it was warm. Amanda walked down the wide, tiled hallway carrying a box of supplies. She wasn't wearing heels anymore. She wore comfortable sneakers and a soft cardigan. Her phone was in her pocket, not glued to her hand. The hallway didn't smell like antiseptic. It smelled like vanilla and fresh baked cookies, thanks to the kitchenette they had installed right in the center of the wing. She stopped at the door of a large community room. It wasn't a sterile waiting room with hard plastic chairs. It was a living room. There were deep, soft sofas arranged in circles. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with games and books. In the corner, a large aquarium hummed with soft, blue light. Amanda walked over to one of the armchairs near the window. It was oversized, upholstered in a durable but soft blue fabric. It had a wide armrest for a parent to sleep on, and it reclined slightly. She sat down in it, pulling her legs up under her. It was the most comfortable chair she had ever sat in. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, walked past holding a stuffed bear. She stopped and looked at Amanda. Do you like my chair? The girl asked. Amanda smiled. It's a wonderful chair. I helped pick it out. It's good, the girl agreed. My mom slept here all night last night when I was scared. She said it didn't hurt her back. Amanda felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the heating. This was it. This was what the $10 million had bought. Not a plaque on a wall, not a gala dinner, but a good night's sleep for a terrified mother. Comfort for a scared child. She looked out the window. The city was gray and busy, but inside here things were slower, kinder. She thought about the man in the worn blazer. She thought about how easy it would have been for him to walk away, to call his lawyer, to sue them, or to just write a nasty article about the charity. But he hadn't. He had seen past her mistake. He had seen her stress and her fear, and he had met it with grace. He had taught her that money wasn't the most valuable thing you could give someone. Patience was. Understanding was. A second chance was. Amanda watched the snow begin to fall outside the window. She took a deep breath, smelling the cookies and the clean air. She wasn't the angry, stressed coordinator anymore. She was just Amanda, the woman who made sure the chairs were soft. And she realized that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She pulled out her phone and opened a blank text message. She typed out a simple message to a number she hadn't used, though she wasn't sure if he would ever see it. "The chairs are perfect. Thank you." She hit send, then put the phone back in her pocket. She didn't need a reply. The proof was right in front of her, in the smile of a little girl with a bear and the peace of a quiet room. She stood up, smoothed her cardigan, and went to go check on the cookies. She had work to do, and for the first time in a long time, she was happy to do it.